Right, so I've hit a wall with my research for the moment. But you slave drivers are baying for blood. I can't breathe through the pressure. No, I'm only joking. But it does mean that you're going to have to wait for a more researched video that has less of me bumbling my way through with limited, "There's a ghost here," with no story. I am currently working on 2 videos at the same time. Multitasking isn't a strong point of mine. One is the story and spirits of the Morgan Arcade, and the other is a story that stemmed from me researching a different story. In other words, chasing stories like a dog trying to chase his own tail. Anyhow, in the meantime, I will tell a different tale. A true tale with a dark ending. On the 20th of November, 1924, in a poor household in the mining town of Merthyr Tydfil, Timothy John Evans was born. His father had abandoned the family shortly before his birth, and his mother tried her best to raise him and his 2 sisters as best she could. Unfortunately, Tim grew up suffering from, and if there's anyone with a medical background, please feel free to correct me on my pronunciation, tuberculosis verrucosa cutis, a form of Mycobacterium tuberculosis in his left foot. Go on, laugh you bastards. You're lucky I can say my own name from time to time. But enough of that. This condition caused him to miss large periods of school. By missing school, it had a knock-on effect, in that Tim could barely read or write by the time he was in his teens. This also had a psychological impact on Tim, in the form of self-consciousness. To make up for it, he became a prolific fibber, for want of a better term. He would tell tall tales of his exploits and conquests to his fellow students in order to gain popularity, or to even fit in with the crowd. As is the case with those who typically tell tall tales,
what alliteration!
Many take the stories with a pinch of salt, and the narrator developing a reputation for being full of it. This unfortunate tendency stretched into his adult life, as you will later see. In 1946, Tim was living in London. Although his literacy skills were still considered extremely low, he managed to hold down a low-paid job as a van driver, barely enough to survive in London. During this time, Tim met a young girl called Beryl. The pair quickly fell in love, married, and before long, Beryl had given birth to a baby girl who they named Geraldine. If you don't know the process of how that happened, I'm not the person to explain it. Perhaps ask your parents or go to the library. For the love of God, don't Google it. But things were doomed from the very start. The lack of money put a massive strain on the couple, especially living in London. They moved into a small rented accommodation at 10 Rillington Place that was being let out by an elderly couple. But things became even more tense. Tim had developed a taste for the bottle and spent many a night down the pub, once again telling exaggerated truths. But not long after moving into the small flat, the tension became intolerable. Out of frustration, the couple began to argue and fight, and things only got worse when Beryl found out that she was once again pregnant. Fearing that a second child would put too great a strain on the marriage, she sought to get an abortion. Now, for context, during this period, abortion was illegal, and so she would have to find someone who could perform the procedure quietly or seek an alternative way to lose the child. On the 30th of November, Tim turned up at the police station back in Merthyr Tydfil, stammering that he'd given Beryl a drink to abort the baby. He claimed that it had gone wrong and that she died, but even more shockingly, that he'd disposed of her body down the drain outside Rillington Place back in London. Shortly after, he was arrested. Immediately, a search of the drain revealed that this was a lie. When the police confronted him on it, he changed his story and stated that the elderly gentleman that he rented the flat from had performed an abortion in which Beryl had died. The landlord then persuaded him to put his daughter Geraldine up for adoption. Once again, a police search was performed on 10 Rillington Place. This time though, the body of Beryl and Tim's infant daughter were found in the communal wash house to the rear of the building. Timothy Evans, when questioned by police, confessed to the murders of Beryl and Geraldine Evans. On the day of his trial for the murder of his daughter Geraldine, Tim once again changed his story. He again blamed everything on the elderly landlord whom he rented the flat from. This elderly landlord testified that he'd often heard screaming and fighting coming from the upstairs flat. The jury took only 40 minutes to come back with a verdict: guilty. Timothy Evans was convicted on 2 counts of murder and sentenced to death by hanging on the 9th of March 1950. But this is not the end of the tale. I will warn you now, viewer discretion is advised. Although I will show the crime scene photos, they will be heavily edited, but the descriptions are still horrendous. On the 24th of March 1953, new tenants had bought the house at 10 Rillington Place from the elderly gentleman. They immediately began stripping wallpaper and redecorating the dated property. This was when the police were once again called to 10 Rillington Place for the last time. When peeling back the wallpaper, the couple found a horrendous smell emanating from the wall. As they pried open the wall cavity, they were met with the horrific sight of a decaying corpse in a blanket. A thorough search of the property was launched, and a total of 6 bodies were found. 3 inside the house hidden under floorboards and within the walls, and a further 3 in the wash house in the garden. All had been gassed or strangled during botched abortions, and evidence suggests that they had been interfered with post-mortem. At least one of the corpses had been present at the site when the police had conducted their initial search when Timothy Evans was arrested for the death of his wife and daughter, since it was later revealed that the landlord had been using a human femur bone to prop up his garden fence. The police issued a wanted poster for the landlord. His name was John Reginald Christie. John Christie was now a vagrant and was arrested shortly after for the murders of 8 individuals, including his wife. It is believed that he was responsible for more murders than the 8 found at 10 Rillington Place, based on trophies that he had took from the victims but didn't match any of the bodies found. I won't go into what those trophies were. John Reginald Christie was executed in the same gallows as Timothy Evans on the 15th of July 1953, and by the same executioner. But enough about the monster, since demons don't deserve anything other than the depths of hell. Back to Christie's 9th victim, Timothy Evans. After Christie's death, the public wanted answers as to how an innocent man of limited intellect could have been executed for murder when the real killer was not only right under the nose of the police, but had the corpses of his victims decaying in his house whilst they searched. In the following years, evidence of coercion by the police, Timothy's own confession, and the testimony of Christie were found to have contributed to his execution. Failings by the police saw to the revision of policing policies, and in 1965, the death penalty was abolished. However, still, after all the evidence, it was deemed that Evans probably killed his wife and child. This decision was eventually overturned in 2003, and Timothy Evans' remaining family were awarded compensation for the wrongful conviction. I appreciate that this is a dark episode, and that no amount of my buffooning around would lighten the subject like this. Hopefully, you are not all that depressed and can stick with me for the next episode. Well, that's all from us here at Dark Entertainment. I hope that you've enjoyed the episode. And if you have, please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and give us a big thumbs up, because the thumbs up really helps us promote the channel. If you'd like to follow us, you can find me on Twitter or X, and on Facebook. Or if you've got a story for me, a tale that you'd like me to look into, or a location, feel free to drop me an email at dark_entertainment@outlook.com. And remember, stay dark, stay creepy, and always laugh. Ta-ta!